You know that feeling. The one that hits you right in the chest when the birthday cake comes out and everyone turns to you with that look. That careful, sorry, we know you can't have any look. And you do the thing you've trained yourself to do. You smile. You wave your hand. You say, "Oh, none for me, thank you." And you mean it. You've meant it for years. But somewhere underneath that polite refusal, there's a quieter voice, one that whispers, "I miss it." What if I told you that voice doesn't have to be right? What if I told you that the cake was never really the enemy? Now, I need you to hold that thought, because I'm about to show you something that might change everything you think you know about dessert after 60. Let me take you back to a hospital in London. Hammersmith Hospital, to be precise. A team of researchers did something that sounds absolutely absurd. They took 9 people with type 2 diabetes and asked them to eat 3 slices of carrot cake every single day. Not for a weekend, not for a week, for 24 days straight. Now, if you're like most people, your brain just short-circuited. 3 slices every day for almost a month. That's not a diet, that's a dare. And then the results came back. And here's where it gets wild. Their blood sugar hadn't risen. Not a spike, not a trend, nothing. Their weight stayed stable. Their cholesterol didn't budge. Their insulin sensitivity didn't drop. They ate cake, and nothing happened. I know what you're thinking. This is clickbait. This is too good to be true. And you're right to be suspicious. Because here's the part they don't put in the headline. The cake in that study wasn't the sugary frosting-slathered slab you buy from the bakery. It was controlled. The calories were balanced. The sugar was spread across the day. The secret wasn't the cake sitting on the plate. It was what was inside it and how it was eaten. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to take that study and pull it apart until you understand exactly what made it work. Because once you understand that, you're not just getting a recipe, you're getting your seat back at the table. But before we go any further, I want you to ask yourself something honest. What's the one dessert you've told yourself you can never touch again? The one you see other people eating and just look away from. Hold that answer in your mind. We're coming back to it. Now, to understand why some cakes destroy your numbers and others barely touch them, you need to understand what's actually happening inside your body. Because the problem was never the word cake. The problem was what a typical bad slice actually is. White refined flour stripped of its fiber, loaded with sugar, topped with a thick layer of sugary frosting. That's a double sugar punch, and it hits fast. Your blood sugar doesn't climb gently, it spikes. And here's the part most people are never told. The way your body handles glucose naturally weakens with age. This isn't a personal failing, it's biology. More than 1 in 5 adults between 60 and 74 are living with type 2 diabetes. And research going back decades shows that glucose tolerance simply declines as we get older. 2 things happen. Your body slowly loses its first phase insulin response. That quick early burst of insulin that used to show up the moment sugar entered your system, it gets slower and smaller. At the same time, your cells grow more resistant to insulin's signal. Let me make this real for you. Think of it this way. When you were 40, your insulin was like a fast, ready sponge sitting right next to the counter. The moment sugar spilled, it wiped it up almost instantly. After 60, that sponge is smaller and it's slower. The sugar spreads out across the counter and sits there far longer than it used to. Same spill, very different cleanup. That is exactly why a slice that did you no harm at 40 can quietly push your numbers up at 66. And that's also why this conversation matters so much. But here's where it turns hopeful. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can work with it. 3 things decide whether a cake is gentle or punishing. 1. The type of flour. 2. How much sugar and what kind. 3. Whether there's fiber, protein, or fat in there to slow the whole thing down. That last one is powerful. In one study, when fiber was added to a cake, its glycemic index dropped from 68 down to 52. That's a 23% fall from the very same dessert. You haven't changed the name. You haven't changed the experience. You've just quietly pulled most of the sugar load out from underneath it. Hold on to those 3 levers, because one cake on today's list sounds like the healthiest of them all, and the version most people eat might be the worst offender on the table. Let's start with number 1. And I'm starting here on purpose because this is the gold standard. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this one swap. Almond flour cake. The whole secret comes down to that first lever, the flour. And the difference is bigger than you'd ever guess from looking at the 2 bags side by side. Take a 1/4 cup of regular white flour, and you're looking at around 24 grams of carbohydrate. Now take that same 1/4 cup, but in almond flour. You're down to roughly 6 grams of carb, and 3 of those 6 are fiber. So the carbohydrate that actually reaches your bloodstream and acts on your sugar is a tiny fraction of what white flour delivers. But it isn't only about having less. It's about what almonds bring with them. The glycemic index of almond flour sits below 40. That means it releases its energy slowly. No sharp spike. And almonds are rich in magnesium. Magnesium is one of the minerals your body leans on to use insulin properly. And here's the troubling part. Somewhere between 25 and 38% of people with type 2 diabetes are running low on it. The very flour you're baking with is feeding a mineral your blood sugar control depends on. And almonds don't just sit there quietly. In crossover trials with people who had trouble managing glucose, adding almonds to a high glycemic meal lowered their blood sugar 2 hours after eating. It did it in a dose-response way, meaning the more almonds added, within reason, the greater the effect. Around 60 grams brought down both blood sugar and insulin levels at once. This isn't a flour that's merely less bad. It's working in your favor. Now, let me be clear about what this is, because I don't want you walking away with the wrong idea. This is still cake. Portion still matters. But picture an almond flour base for a birthday cake or almond cookies, and you've got something you can genuinely sit down and enjoy. The natural fat and protein in those almonds, that's not a flaw in the recipe. That's the very reason the whole thing stays gentle. It's the slowdown built right into the ingredient. That's number 1. Now let me give you a second flour to keep in your kitchen. Number 2 is coconut flour cake. And I love this one as a partner to the first, because it works on the very same principle. Change the flour. But it gives you a second option that's easy to find and just as friendly to your numbers. Here's why coconut flour earns its place. It is remarkably high in fiber and very low in the carbohydrate that actually reaches your blood. Remember that third lever, fiber, slowing the whole thing down? Coconut flour has that built right in. All that fiber acts like a brake on how fast the sugar gets absorbed. So even something like a coconut flour pound cake or simple loaf releases its energy slowly instead of all at once. Now let me give you a practical tip, because if you've ever tried to bake with this flour, you may have ended up with something dry and crumbly. Coconut flour drinks up liquid like a sponge. It needs far more eggs and more liquid than you'd expect. And here's the quiet bonus in that. All those extra eggs add protein, and protein is yet another speed bump on the sugar's path into your blood. The very thing that makes coconut flour tricky to bake with is also making the finished cake gentler. But I have to clear up one trap here because it catches a lot of careful people. Do not assume gluten-free means safe for your blood sugar. They are not the same thing, not even close. Plenty of gluten-free cakes are built on rice flour, and rice flour can carry a glycemic index anywhere from 70 all the way up to 95. That's spike territory. A label shouting gluten-free tells you nothing about what it'll do to your numbers. The flour is the answer. Always look at the flour. And the same honest rule applies to coconut flour that applied to almond. It's only gentle when it hasn't been packed with sugar. You still want your sweetness coming from a source that barely moves your blood sugar. And you still want a sensible portion. Get those right, and coconut flour gives you a warm, satisfying cake that works with your body instead of against it. That's 2 flours in your corner now. But the next cake is where things get really interesting, because it's the one I warned you about. Number 3 is carrot cake. And this is the one I told you to watch for, because it hides a real paradox. Untangling it might change how you see your whole dessert plate. Let me tell you about Margaret. She was 71 when she came to see me, and she sat down genuinely puzzled, almost a little hurt. Her afternoon blood sugar kept reading high, and she couldn't make sense of it, because in her mind she was eating well. As we walked through her day, it came out. Every single afternoon, she had a slice of carrot cake from the bakery down her street. And she said it with a small, sheepish smile. Well, it's basically a salad with frosting, isn't it? She even kept her slices in an old biscuit tin on the counter. Somewhere along the way, she'd quietly filed that cake under my vegetables. She wasn't being careless. She'd been told carrots are good for her, and she believed it. So here's the hard truth about that bakery version. A typical one is built on several cups of white sugar and brown sugar, white refined flour, and then crowned with a thick cream cheese frosting. To anyone watching their carbs, calling that healthy is like calling an organic potato chip a health food. The word carrot on the menu was never the thing protecting her. But here's the turn. The carrot itself, the actual vegetable, is genuinely on your side. A real carrot has a glycemic index around 47, and because of all its fiber, its glycemic load per serving is only about 1.6. That is tiny. The vegetable was never the villain. The villain moved in with the sugar and the white flour. And now think back to the very start of this video. Those 3 slices a day in that London study, the ones that didn't raise anyone's blood sugar. That cake was carrot cake. The work came out of Hammersmith Hospital in London, led by Professor Gary Frost. 9 patients with type 2 diabetes, 3 slices a day, 24 days, and at the end, no rise in blood sugar, no weight gain, no jump in cholesterol, and no drop in insulin sensitivity. But I'll always tell you the whole picture. That held because the calories were kept balanced and the sugar was spread across the day. It was a small group studied over a short window. It isn't a license to eat the bakery slab. It's proof that the right version, eaten the right way, behaves completely differently. So what did Margaret's version end up being? An almond flour base, real grated carrot with its fiber kept intact, warm cinnamon, and just a restrained touch of sweetness. Same cake she loved, a completely different afternoon reading. Let me ask you something, honestly, before we move on. Have you been eating something healthy every afternoon and quietly wondering why your numbers just won't settle? Tell me what it is down in the comments. You might be surprised what's hiding in plain sight. Because the next one surprises almost everyone for the opposite reason. Number 4 is cheesecake. And I can already hear what you're thinking because everyone thinks it. Something that rich, that creamy, that indulgent. Surely that's the worst thing a person with diabetes could put on a plate. But stay with me, because the part everyone fears is actually the part working in your favor. Here's the mechanism. That thick, creamy filling is made from cream cheese. And cream cheese is high in fat and protein. Those two together do exactly what we keep coming back to today. They slow absorption right down. Cheese on its own has a low glycemic index and releases glucose slowly. The very richness you've been taught to be afraid of is biologically the brake. It's the reason the sugar doesn't rush in. So if the creamy part isn't the problem, where's the damage actually coming from? 2 places, and only 2. The crust and the sugar. That classic graham cracker crust is white flour and sugar pressed into the bottom of the pan. Then there's sugar mixed through the filling itself. Put those together, and a single slice of traditional cheesecake can carry around 34 grams of carbohydrate. The trouble was never the cheese. It was the floor it was standing on, and the sugar stirred into it. Now watch what happens when you fix just those 2 things. Swap that crust for an almond flour base. Pull the added sugar way back, using a sweetener that barely touches your blood sugar. And top it with berries instead of a sugary glaze. Do that, and a slice can come down to roughly 7 or 8 grams of carbohydrate. From 34 down to under 8. And you didn't sacrifice the thing you love about it. The berries, by the way, aren't just decoration. They bring their own fiber and a dose of antioxidants along for the ride. So they're earning their spot. And this is exactly why I keep hammering on the same idea. Because cheesecake proves it better than almost anything. The same word on the menu, cheesecake, can be one of the worst choices on the table, or one of the gentlest. Nothing about the name tells you which. It comes down to the crust underneath and the sugar inside. Change those 2, and you've changed the whole story. So that's the rich one handled. But now we arrive at number 5. This is the one I promised you all the way back at the start. The cake almost everyone is absolutely certain is the most forbidden of all. And I think it's going to be the one that surprises you most. Flourless dark chocolate cake. For most people, chocolate cake is the ultimate forbidden dessert. The thing you don't even let yourself look at after a diagnosis. So let me show you why the cake everyone fears most might actually be one of the gentlest on this entire list. But first, let me tell you about Raymond. He was 66, and from the day he was diagnosed, he had quietly turned himself into a spectator at his own family's table. Every gathering, every holiday, the dessert would come around, and he'd give a small wave of the hand and a polite, "None for me." And then he'd sit there with a cup of black coffee while everyone else ate. He told me he'd started to feel like the sick one at the table. And then he said something that has stayed with me. At his granddaughter's birthday, he leaned over and asked me almost under his breath, "Is there anything at that table I'm actually allowed to have?" That quiet question is the reason I make videos like this one. So let me answer Raymond and answer you. Why does flourless chocolate cake work? Start with the name, flourless. There's no white flour in it at all, which means that double sugar punch we talked about simply isn't there. Instead, it's built from almond flour or cocoa, eggs, and good dark chocolate, 70% or higher. The eggs and the almond bring fat and protein, that built-in break again. And the result is a cake that keeps blood sugar remarkably steady. Some recipes come in at only around 5 or 6 grams of net carb per slice. From the cake people are most afraid of. Now I'm going to stay honest with you the way I always try to. Because dark chocolate gets talked about like a health food, and that's not quite right either. It does contain genuine beneficial plant compounds, that part is true. But it's also rich and calorie-dense. So this is not a cake you eat in a large wedge. A small portion is the whole key. Get that right, and you've got something real to enjoy. Push the portion too far, and you've undone the very thing that made it gentle. Both things are true at once, and you deserve to hear both. So there it is. The cake you were most convinced was off-limits forever, turns out, made this way, to be one of the kindest choices you can make for your blood sugar. That's the surprise I promised you. And Raymond. A few months later, at the next family gathering, he had a proper slice of dark chocolate cake made the right way, sitting right there with everyone else. He wasn't the spectator anymore. He was just a grandfather having dessert. That's not a medical miracle. It's something simpler, and I think more important. It's a seat back at your own table. There's just one more thing I have to give you, because without it, even these 5 cakes can quietly work against you. The kind of cake matters. We've spent this whole time on it, but how you eat it decides easily half the story. Get this part wrong, and even the gentlest cake on the list can spike you. Let me give you the picture I want you to hold. Fiber, protein, and fat are speed bumps on the road. The sugar still travels into your blood. That doesn't change. But instead of racing in all at once, it slows down and arrives gently. Every cake we talked about today leans on those speed bumps. Now here's how you make sure they actually do their job. 3 simple rules. First, a real portion. 1 thin slice. Not a big corner piece. Not, well, it's the good kind, so I'll have 2. Second, timing. Eat it after a meal that already had some protein in it. Never on an empty stomach. An empty stomach lets the sugar in with nothing to slow it. Third, pair it. A few nuts. A spoon of plain, unsweetened yogurt alongside. Protein and fiber take longer to digest than simple carbs, and they'll drag the whole absorption out for you. One quick caution, and I'll keep it brief because it deserves its own video. A sugar-free label does not automatically mean heart safe. Some sweeteners are still being studied for their effect on the heart, with work from places like the Cleveland Clinic raising real questions. I'll cover that in detail in another video. The link is in the description. And the last thing, the most personal thing. Every single body is different. The only way to truly know which of these cakes your body handles well is to check your own blood sugar about 2 hours after you eat it. That number is yours. It'll tell you better than I ever could exactly which cake belongs on your plate. So let's bring it home. A diabetes diagnosis after 60 does not mean cake is gone from your life forever. I hope you can feel now why that was never the real story. It was never about the word on the menu, never about cake being some single forbidden thing. It comes down to 3 honest things: the type of flour, the amount of sugar, and the way you eat it. Get those right, and dessert can come back to your table without quietly stealing your health. That's the whole truth of it. So here's exactly where to start. 3 simple steps you can put to work this week. First, when you bake a cake or shop for one, reach for an almond flour or coconut flour base instead of white refined flour. That single swap does more than any other. Second, eat your slice thin and eat it after a meal that had some protein in it, never on an empty stomach. And put a few nuts or some berries alongside it. Third, the most useful habit of all. When you try a new kind, check your blood sugar about 2 hours later and write the number down. Over a few weeks, you'll have your own personal map of which cakes your body handles well. Bring that map to your doctor and let it guide the conversation together. Now I'd love to hear from you. Of these 5, which one will you bake or buy first? Tell me down in the comments. And if you know someone, a husband, a sister, an old friend who has quietly given up every dessert since the day they were diagnosed, send them this video. Let them know there are still choices on the table. I'm Dr. Claire Whitmore. I want to see you enjoying birthdays again, sitting in the middle of them, not off to the side. Everything I've shared today is here to teach and to guide you, not to replace the doctor who knows your case. So please never stop or change any medication on your own without speaking to them first. Take good care of yourself. Keep finding the small joys that make these years worth it. And subscribe so I can keep walking through this with you. I'll see you in the next one.